Hello, and welcome to another Pagico tutorial. Today in this video, I will give you a walkthrough on how to get the most out of the automated workflow feature. Let's get started. First, let's take a look at a few sample workflows. To manage your workflows and to create new ones, go to the Settings panel, then switch to the Database Specific tab. There, you'll find the workflow editor. Let's take a look at how this workflow works. First, this workflow is triggered when a task carries a specific keyword at design, and it performs these actions in sequence. So let's give it a try by creating a new task carrying this keyword. As expected, Pagico sets the category on the initial task and adds the follow-up items automatically. Let's come back and look at how this workflow is constructed. First, a workflow needs a trigger. This defines the condition and the source object that initiates the workflow. The source object is very important as it is passed down to the actions to be processed. After the trigger, a workflow also needs one or more actions. These actions are things that Pagico performs in sequence. For every action, the resulting object from the previous step is passed in for further processing or reference. Let's create a similar workflow from scratch. First, workflows should be appropriately named. They can also be enabled or disabled. If you wish to use a workflow, definitely enable it. Having lots of workflow may introduce performance slowdowns, so disable workflows that you don't need. Then, configure the trigger, which defines the conditions for this workflow to be invoked. Remember that this is a match-all trigger, meaning that the workflow is only invoked when all the defined conditions are met. Also, each object can invoke a workflow only once to prevent the potential of a runaway situation. Finally, add in some actions. Remember that actions are performed sequentially and that the upstream objects are available to each action for potential referencing or processing. Actions can also be reordered using the drag handles. Let's look at another workflow. This is the registration of a new client and the creation of the follow-up tasks. In this case, the workflow is triggered when a contact is updated with a specific contact property. Then Pagico automatically adds the routine content, such as sending welcome emails and follow-up tasks, to the contact. You may notice that Pagico sends out an automated email in this workflow. Speaking of automated emails, this is a server-powered feature that requires an active Pagico service plan to function. The email action is also rate-limited to prevent potential service abuse. Let's see how this workflow performs. Sometimes, it makes sense to have workflows that are invoked on demand. For example, we have a workflow for new software releases. Each time we start the development of a new version, we use this workflow to automatically create the new project and some routine content. To achieve this, just set the workflow trigger to manual. There are a few ways to invoke this workflow. First, you can activate these workflows in the Create New menu in any container, or the contextual menu of any data objects. The object that the action is performed on will be passed to the workflow actions for processing. Alternatively, you can also create action buttons in Pagico. This allows you to create buttons that activate certain workflows on demand. To do so, use the square bracket inline link syntax and create a link to the desired workflow. You can also right-click and use the Link Helper panel to search and select the desired workflow. Once the Workflow action button is visible, you can click on it to invoke the workflow. This method allows you to embed action buttons in lists and notes, making it easy to create interactive dashboards like this one. So far, all the workflow actions create content that you define. But what if you want to incorporate content from the upstream object? You can do so with the content variable feature. Simply use the double curly bracket syntax to insert various properties from the upstream object. You can use these variables in text fields and date fields. Here's an example. Let's say I want to send a chat message when a client is registered. So I go to the workflow, add a new action, then type in the message with the content variable wrapped in double curly brackets. The actual chat message will replace the variable with the actual name property of the upstream object, which is the contact. Similarly, you can create an action that drafts an email. You can use content variables to make the automated emails more informative. What we have talked about so far are text variables, which include things like contact names, task titles, descriptions, notes, and file names, etc. For workflows, dates can also be used as variables. For example, if you wish to create a task using the due date of the upstream task, you can do it by using the due date content variable. In many cases, you may want to create tasks that are due sometime after the upstream task, so you need to manipulate the date values. Pagico supports some basic date manipulations, such as plus or minus a certain amount of time. For example, if I want to create a new task 5 days after the previous task completion date, I would set the due date to completion date plus 5 days. If I want to set up a task that is due 2 hours after the completion date, that's possible too. The date manipulation supports all the common phrases, such as minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and even years. You can also do -2 in case that's needed. The date variables can also be used in text fields. For example, if you used a date variable in a task title or email subject, the date will be rendered in text form. Last but not least, the new container action now supports templates. So you can create workflows that create new projects or contacts with a pre-selected template. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching and for choosing Pagico. If you're new to Pagico, we invite you to download a free trial for 2 weeks at pagico.com. If you have questions or comments, let us know by commenting below or emailing us at support@pagico.com. Thank you.